Hey guys, welcome back to Relatable Nerds. Kyra here, and today we are going to be breaking down Daredevil Born Again, episode 4. Now, last week's episode of Daredevil was absolutely heartbreaking. We got to follow the court case of Hector Olaya, aka the White Tiger, and watch Matt Murdock defend him and go through all of the court proceedings. It was intense and emotional, to say the very least. We got to see Officer Powell on the stand as well, and how corrupt him and all of these cops in New York are. Matt ended up revealing Hector is the White Tiger to the entire courtroom, which obviously gave up his identity, which becomes a very tricky situation for any vigilante out there, because obviously one of the main reasons they keep their anonymity is to protect themselves and their loved ones. So that is a sticky situation to be in. That somehow got the jury to find Hector not guilty. It was such a relief in the courtroom. A weight had been lifted, but unfortunately, because of his identity being revealed at the end of episode 3, Hector was killed. It was such a sad moment. The system is failing so many people in New York, and that's what episode 4 is going to dive into. The actual title of this episode is Sic Temper Systema. We are definitely going to dive into what is going on in New York right now and why so many people are being failed by the system. We have kind of this big bad at the forefront of New York, Wilson Fisk. All of his lies and all of the sketchy things about him are starting to come to light, and we see that in this episode. We also get a very special visit. I'm sure you guys can guess who it is by now. The internet has been going crazy over it, but Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, John Bernthal, is very much in this episode. Let's get into it. This episode starts out by Matt collecting all of Hector's things post-death. Hector's niece, Angela, ends up running into Matt, and she already knows what happened to him is shady. She's calling Matt out on what happened to Hector, how nobody's going to remember him, how he's just another number in the system, and everybody's not even really caring that he passed, so quickly after his court case. There is a potential scenario where she takes up after her uncle as the White Tiger. I think that could be so cool with the future of Marvel, Young Avengers perhaps, and I would love to see the traditions of the White Tiger live on and somebody take all of that rage in and do something with it. She's upset, she's fiery, she's angry, she has every right to be, because the system is failing so many. We then cut to Dr. Glenn with Wilson and Vanessa. It looks like they're making a little bit of progress here. They're sitting closer to each other on the couch. They start to discuss Vanessa's affair, though, with Adam, and that does not sit well with Wilson. Dr. Glenn definitely picks up on Wilson's tendencies to be having a hint of violence underlying there when he speaks. Wilson talks about how he had a conversation with Adam, which, immediately upon watching it, I'm like, that's some BS right there. He definitely either killed this guy, tortured him, or did something pretty bad to this guy, because you just do not cross Wilson Fisk. And as I said, Dr. Glenn is starting to notice that. Vanessa became a little uncomfortable when Wilson was discussing the fate of Adam and what has happened to him. Obviously, Vanessa has asked Wilson to spare Adam's life, because the only reason she really had that affair to begin with is because Wilson left her in the dust when he was recovering from his injury. Matt also has a new case in this episode with Leroy. Leroy was arrested because he stole popcorn from a corner store or a bodega. Matt is assigned to him, and Matt is doing everything in his power to help this guy. Matt ends up flirting with one of the court officials by... This is kind of weird. It's kind of weird to describe what he does, but he has that, those super senses going on, and he super smells, I guess, that she had like a piece of honey cake or honey pie, a honey bun, something like that for breakfast. And he drops that ever so subtly when he's trying to talk her into giving Leroy less amount of time in jail, and it works. He ends up getting Leroy's case knocked down to 10 days. He goes back to Leroy and tells him this, and Leroy is still very upset about this, because in the past, he's been in jail and he's missed certain meetings he has to get his food stamps, to get his Medicaid, all of those things. And it's so incredibly hard for him to come back for that. And that's why he's trying to avoid jail as much as he can. Matt's trying to tell him this is best case scenario. And unfortunately, this happens all too often with the system failing people. That theme of this episode. Matt is kind of left frustrated because he sees the pain that Leroy is going through, but at the same time, Wilson is mayor. Matt knows the potential this man has to corrupt the city, and he knows his plans for all of the vigilantes. So Matt is definitely still harvesting and harboring this energy of frustration towards the city and the system. And also, we all still know this, but Matt is not Daredevil still. He's very much a legal practicing lawyer. He is not wearing his red getup at all still since Foggy's death. So as I was saying in my last recap, this frustration is just building and building and building and building because there's so much going on in his world, and he's trying to do right by everybody, but he knows he could also solve a lot of these problems if he would just put that Daredevil on, but he's trying very hard to do everything the legal way. We see Wilson is getting more frustrated by not being able to do things in his corrupt manner. He has to do things by the book, especially with some of these projects he wants to do for renovations in certain parts of the city that have a lot of crime. It's basically just gentrification, what he's trying to do with building all of these model condos that look exactly the same as the ones next to them and going into these parts of New York. Wilson is just frustrated. He can't just get things done like he used to because he is the mayor and he is under this microscope. He has to do things the right way. People on the streets are starting to question him. They're starting to catch on his corruptness, whether it is the violence. Even just one of the women that was interviewed for the BB report talks about the garbage being left in the streets. If you've been to New York, you know a little bit about New York. If you know, the garbage in the streets, no alleys. That is quite the culture shock about New York, is that the garbage is just left in the streets on certain days, and Wilson apparently isn't really doing too much about it. I don't think it'll be too long before people realize how corrupt he is. All of this is happening. Matt is also trying to piece together what happened to Hector. Who did this to him? He goes back to the scene of the crime and ends up finding a bullet casing with what on it? The Punisher logo, of course. The man who shot Hector had a huge Punisher logo on his chest, and this does lead to Matt paying Frank Castle a visit. This was without a doubt the best part of this episode. Frank is exactly the same as we left him. He is still fighting all of his demons after what happened to his son and his family. He is definitely a little shocked to see Matt, but it also seems like he's been waiting to have this conversation with him. Matt tells him he found this bullet casing. Hector was killed. Did you do it? And Frank says all of those guys are just pretty much Punisher fanboys. And so Frank pretty much is like, why are you here? Like, I didn't do that. He doesn't have time for any of his, and I quote, candy hero. That really sets Matt off. He's just like, he tells him like, I'm not even Daredevil right now. I'm not even doing that. That life isn't for me anymore. And Frank doesn't waste any time. And he's like, what about Foggy? What about your friend? Why wouldn't you seek revenge against Bullseye? Bullseye is breathing the same air as you right now, is alive while your best friend is dead. Why wouldn't you want to seek revenge against that? And, Matt kind of gets a little emotional through all this, and Frank does not stop. He's like, you can't even say his name. And Matt is kind of just stricken with emotion. It's really, really sad. He breaks down, and Frank kind of backs off a little bit, but he also does bring up his son, and every time he stops moving, he says he can hear his son's voice, and that's why he keeps going, because he's motivated by what happened to his son with his death, and he connects with Matt on that. It was definitely an emotional moment, very much needed for this point of the show. Like I said, everything that's happening to Matt now is leading him in a direction to have to put the suit back on. It's getting to the point where he is going to have to take matters into his own hands, quite literally, and it does seem like Frank would be ready to help when Matt is ready to, do things the Punisher way, the Daredevil way. I think Frank will definitely be seeing him again in the season when Matt calls upon him to help him, because like I said, they are going down a path where it is inevitable. Matt is going to have to put the suit back on way sooner than later. Finally cut to a scene, Matt and Heather in Matt's apartment. Finally, Matt gets a break from reality. I really like that Heather is providing him a safe space. He even mentions how they're living together. He used to come back to an empty apartment, and he's really, keen to the idea of her being there when he gets home. I love that they're connecting like that. Really big fan of Heather. I love her for Matt. I think they work really well together. Obviously, she has this insane baggage that Matt doesn't know about, which is that she is Wilson and Vanessa's couples therapist. She has an insider's view at everything going on in their life. God forbid if Matt knew this. Obviously, Heather is a great doctor, and because of HIPAA and everything, she's not going to spill the beans at all. But she said, she alludes to it while they're speaking. So I think sooner than later, Matt is going to find out that she is their therapist. I don't think she will tell him, but I think he's going to find out on his own when he's like following Wilson, or something's going to happen where they're going to cross paths and he's going to see Wilson and Vanessa leaving her office, which when that happens, wow, I wonder how he's going to play those cards. Maybe they will connect on the basis that they both think Wilson is dangerous. Obviously, Heather is picking up on those cues while she is in their sessions for therapy. Matt ends up not being able to sleep that night. He goes to his Daredevil lair and he gets his weapons out, his nunchucks. I don't even know what they're called. I'm sorry, you guys. But he gets those out and he starts practicing on the roof. Like I said, he is taking those baby steps to getting back into that suit. It was really cool to see all the versions and variations of his suits with the different masks and everything. It was such an exciting moment because it is happening very, very soon. And while he's practicing all of his moves and getting ready, you see that Wilson is sitting down for dinner and he pours his wine and you hear a man screaming, "Please, let me out." He's obviously Wilson's prisoner, and it is none other than Adam, aka who Vanessa had an affair with. I knew that Wilson was up to no good when he was just speaking about Adam in their therapy sessions. I had thought he maybe killed him already, but he's torturing him and he's locked up. Vanessa has no idea that this is going on. Nobody has any idea that this is going on. It is true Wilson Fisk style. We are starting to see, as he gets more corrupt and more blood on his hands, Matt is starting to take those steps to get back in his suit. You can't have one without the other. There needs to be a different checks and balances system other than this failing system that New York has. It was really cool to see Matt step back into his Daredevil element, start practicing on the rooftop. He knows that he has to put that suit on very, very soon. This episode was so much fun. From getting to see Frank Castle again, that was so exciting. I can't wait for him to return later on in the season. Hopefully sooner than later to see him and Matt in action would be great. It was so fun to see him after all of this time. A lot of corruption and evil things going on in the air. Make sure to let me know what you thought of Daredevil Born Again episode 4 in the comments. And thanks so much for tuning in to all of my reactions and breakdowns. I'm having such a fun time covering this show. It's been so amazing. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Bye.